Okay. Can you all hear me okay? Yes. We'll go ahead and get started as people continue to come. I want to welcome us all to what I think will be a lively forum as we convene to respond to the threat of a virulent contagion sweeping our body politic in the form of Christian nationalism. We have much to learn from each other, and I can't wait to get into the conversation in the next 2 days. We're glad that you have come together for this time, and thank you, first of all, thank you, Dr. Joseph Evans, the Director of the Center for Truth, Racial Healing, and Restorative Justice, and thank you, and its advisory committee, and our academic dean, Dr. LeAnn Snow Flesher, for organizing this event. And of course, all others who've helped with the input on our panels, leading table talks, doing logistics, food prep, and setup. In setting the stage for today and tomorrow, I would draw our attention devotionally for just a few minutes to remind us that before there was Christian nationalism, before there were nation states, before the Holy Roman Empire, before the papal bull of 1490s with its doctrine of discovery, before the manifest destiny of European imperialisms, before Constantine's church-state Christendom, before the kingdoms of Judah and Israel, God had warned God's people about their wanton desire to become like all the other nations with a king to rule over them. Therein is the seed for what would become religious nationalisms, church-state nationalisms, and other idolatrous kinds of rule. So, let me take us back, to the biblical period of the judges, to the very last judge in a series of judges by the name of Samuel. 1 Samuel 8-11 is this wonderful debate, interbiblical debate, about whether we should have a king or we shouldn't have a king. In chapters 8, verse 4, we're told that all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, "You are old." Sound familiar? "You are old. Appoint for us a king to govern us like all the other nations." But the thing displeased Samuel, the text says, when they said, "Give us a king to govern us." Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, "Listen to the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, Samuel, but they have rejected me from being king over them." That statement, that lament of God, "They have rejected me," breaks my heart. The psalmist would later express God's feeling in this regard in Psalm 106. God gave them their request, but infirmity would possess their souls from that day on. The rejection of God, the one and only God, as their one and only warrior. Yahweh is our warrior, Exodus 15. Yahweh stood up against Pharaoh with no help from human beings. Their one and only God, their one and only King, their protector, their provider, their avenger, their rock. These are all descriptions of Yahweh's power and rule. Set the stage for God's people falling into the age-old trap, that is, their rejection of God, set the stage for God's people falling into the age-old trap, the desire to be like all the nations of the world, and simultaneously reenact the human desire for self-rule, all the while wanting and even boldly claiming that the God that they had just rejected as their king would now bless their national aspirations. So God warns them, Do you really know what you're doing in rejecting me as your king and wanting to be all like the nations of the world? God tells Samuel to tell the people exactly what human kings and rulers will be like in chapter 8, verses 11 to 14. And in Hebrew, it just is a repeat, it's a refrain. They will take, they will take, they will take. The king will take thousands upon thousands of your sons. Draft them into the industrial military complex to build chariots and to raise horses for battle and send them as cannon fodder into the war. You want a king? He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers for his own pleasure. You want a king? Like all the other nations, he will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to the courtiers. He will tax you 1/10 of your grain of all your vineyards and give it to the officers. He will take your male and female slaves, your best fields, and the best of your cattle and donkeys, and put them to work for his own self-rule. He will take tax 1/10 of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves. Then in chapter 10:25, Samuel tells the people, okay, by contrast, here are the rights and duties of the kingship, which he wrote in a book. And I'm thinking that Samuel is reading the laws of kingship in Deuteronomy 17 at this point. Here's an alternative vision. Even if you want a king, you want a king? Here's the kind of king I want you to have according to the constitution of emerging Israel, Deuteronomy 17, the law of kingship. When you have come into the land the Lord your God is giving you and have taken possession of it, and you say, I will set a king over me like all the other nations that are around me, you may indeed set over you a king whom the Lord your God shall choose, but, here's the big vav, the but in Hebrew, but. If you do this, this king must be a member of the community, not above or below them, must not have a standing army, acquiring horses and chariots. Can you believe this kind of king? Must not make foreign alliances, that is, marrying a bunch of foreign wives to make these alliances, and or buy horses and chariots from foreign governments. Can't do it. Must have a copy of the Torah on a scroll in their throne room, read it daily, and obey its statutes. And the book of Deuteronomy is full of justice statutes about the poor, the underprivileged. And he must, this is the best one of all, this king must not exalt himself over others in the community. This is a very different kind of king, isn't it? And yet, with all this warning, the people still want to have a king like all the other nations. So finally, God says that in rejecting God as their king, they may very likely find themselves in horrible, untenable political and brutal social situations that when they cry out for God's intervention and help, God will not answer them. Chapter 8, verse 18. So let us be warned. The biblical story is the story of people wanting human rule in the place of divine rule. Nationhood above peoplehood. Human-made regimes above serving God in God's upside-down, bottoms-up regime. All the while still wanting and even boldly claiming that the God they just rejected as their king somehow now uniquely blesses their national and political aspirations. An irony of ironies. This story exposes the dark side of what would become the fall of the house of David, Solomon, Israel, Judah. The fall of the church under Constantine. The dark ages of the Crusades. The brutality of the church-sanctioned doctrine of discovery. the manifest destiny of Christian, Muslim, Jewish, and other imperialisms and colonial enterprises, leading us to the Christian nationalism of our convening conversations today and tomorrow. May God grant us wisdom and grace as we seek clarity from each other about our own complicities and loyalties to these age-old temptation to abandon God's upside-down, self-emptying rule, modeled for us in our crucified Lord, Jesus of Nazareth, executed under the jeering and taunting banner of the Roman Empire as King of the Jews in scare quotes. May that King reign in our hearts and over our actions now and forever and in this convening. Amen.
Amen.
Well, first of all, good morning. I want to thank Dr. Brenneman, our president, for setting the context for why we have convened here, and did it in a fashion that made it easy for us to look at historical realities recorded in 1 Samuel in chapter 7 and going forward. I don't think it was very hard for us not to see ourselves in his presentation, which again indicates why we hope that we are here today. My job is easy. I am Joseph Evans. Thank you for recognizing the work that the center does, Truth, Racial Healing, and Restorative Justice. And on the tables, you'll see that there's an actual center card. I only put a couple there. Some of us have access to them because we serve here. Others are guests, please. And if you don't have enough, I will make sure that you have them. But here's what we essentially do at the center. We decolonize theological education, full stop. But if you want more, locally and globally, to renew, reconstruct, and repair churches, communities in the world through reflection, critique, and practice. That's what's printed here. But let us also add that the center really wants to be a part of what we think is called the third reconstruction. If we take the 1860, some people say 61, I don't know how the Reconstruction started before the Civil War was over, but however there. And it goes basically to 1880, some people say. And out of which we had the White Citizens Council, the Ku Klux Klan, and many different morphs of organizations to demonize everyone who is present in this room. But that being said, that third reconstruction points to our effort to work alongside other disciplines who are engaged in similar agenda items and necessary anthropologists, I might add. But the fact is that we have a very important role because of we are working with the theology of the times. And so part of that is being here today to address what Dr. Brenneman has brought to our attention. So let's do a couple of housekeeping notes. That's really what my job is. If you were to go out the door here and go directly across that little sidewalk there are restrooms there. So that's very convenient for us. And you see the snacks and so forth and so on. I'm going to just do a quick briefing of the schedule over the next couple of days. And we're going to try to follow this as closely as possible. Dean Flesher will come after me, and she's going to kind of explain how we want to use the rules of engagement. And I think that is important, obviously, in anything that we're going to try to do, and that'll keep us online. Let me go a deductive thing. By the time we're done here, we hope that we will have enough information from all of you to create a document that we will release, perhaps to local newspapers. This is what our convening came up with over 2 days of conversation with one another. And this is what we want you to know as we prepare for the most important election in our lifetimes. We keep saying that, but this one clearly is. And so we want to engage in that process as we can. There are other people doing it, but we felt that it's important as an institution that we do the same. So we're going to begin with what is Christian nationalism. You see that there, and obviously we're going to try to define that. And then we have what the dean will come behind and talk about is table talk. You see Drs. Miles-Tribble and Dr. LeAnn Flesher will begin with what is Christian nationalism. Then lunch is provided in Fleming Hall. And then the afternoon session is how does Christian nationalism threaten democracy? We hope that we have designed these syntactically or arranged and organized so one feeds right into the next one. And so Dr. Hopkins, Dr. Laura Jean Torgerson, Dr. Hannah Kang, and Professor James Gradison will be leading us through that particular discussion. And then we have time again at 1:30 to 2:30 to talk about it. And then we're going to report out, which Dean will again tell us what that looks like, what the report out is. And then we'll close for the day. And if some of you are not familiar with Berkeley that are visiting, there are people here that can tell you places you may want to go, right? And on tomorrow, we again start with devotions, instruction for the day. And somehow I'm supposed to follow Jim Renneman. Hopefully by then you will have cooled down in here. Panel 3, how does Christian nationalism threaten Christianity and religious freedom? That's a hot topic. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of it, but I mean, people are hiding behind that. And so we need to make sure that we weigh in on that as well. And that's Dr. Brenneman, Dr. Park, Dr. Sias, and Judge Gail Variola. Table talk again, lunch provided. I assume it's in Fleming Hall, but obviously we'll be able to update you by the time tomorrow comes. And then panel 4, what can we do? We have to have some kind of action item. It's not enough for us to gather if we don't talk about what do we do. Dr. Amanda Tyler, or Attorney Amanda Tyler, who is our lecturer for tomorrow night from the Baptist Joint Committee, and I'm sure many of you know who she is, but she has clearly leaned into this issue. She is baptized into this issue, and she has made her effort to strike a blow, as Henry Highland Gardner would say, for justice. She hopes to be here in time to be on this panel, and we're hoping she'll be here. Then table talk, report out, and the report outs again will help us to create a document, right? Finally, the evening lecture will follow in this space, and all of this will be reconstructed for us to do that. White Christian nationalism, how does it threaten our democracy and what we can do together. Now, I think this is on the table, convening questions. Does everybody have one of those? I think this will be informative. Now, this is basically used by the table servant leaders, but I also think it helps us to continue to think critically about what we're trying to achieve here. I'll just use one question. These were turned in by you. When you think about the various ways that white Christian nationalism threatens democracy, what are one of the 2 issues that most directly affect you and your community? Those types of questions help you and I formulate answers that can easily be put into a document when we're finished with this, right? When we talk to a larger audience. So keep these in mind. You don't have to, these are questions you can already think of something we haven't thought of. But the point is, it's just a guide. Now, with that, I think we're ready to go. Once again, welcome. We're glad you're here. And I think the people that have been gathered here are going to really create a lot of synergy, energy, and a way forward. And in my tradition, Ashe, and you say Ashe-o.
Thank you, Drs. Brenneman and Dr. Evans, for starting us off. I'm going to just give us a couple more details so that we understand what we're about here. The whole philosophy behind a convening is that everybody in the room has something to bring to this conversation. Everybody in the room has been thinking about this, reading about this, hearing about it in the news and on the television and so on. And there are a lot of questions floating around in our brains. And so our goal for this particular convening is that you're able to walk out of here with some very clear, succinct ideas in your thinking, which when you are asked questions about this, you are able to quickly and easily answer those in a meaningful way. I assume that everyone here is a leader in their faith community, because that's who we invited to be here. There will be more who will come as we go along. They have let me know. I've gotten many emails over the last few days about this, and they have let me know I have to come late or I have to come at this time and so on. So there are more who will be coming on their way. But the panelists, I want to say especially, this morning it's just two of us, Dr. Miles-Tribble and myself, and we have actually used some of the information we're going to talk about this morning in classes. We've actually done some coursework on this material, so we got picked to do the introductory stuff. But you know what we're about right now is to do some definitions so that we're kind of all on the same page, we're all in the same space. On your table, there is also a list of questions. All of the panelists have sent me questions that we have then put together in a list that relate to the four major categories that we're going to address throughout the next 2 days. And those questions, I don't know that you'll get to all of them in the time period that you have, but they're there to stimulate your conversation, to stimulate your thinking. So if you feel like you're kind of hitting a lull, pull up one of those questions. Also, look through them, and if you feel like there's one of those you really want to focus on, make sure you get to do that. There are table leaders for each table, and those leaders are there to really just keep that conversation moving and to help you organize your thoughts, because there will be a report out at the end of each day where we would like each table to bring forth to the whole group your major ideas for the day. What you think are the most significant ideas for the day, so that we're able at some point to communicate with everybody in the room. Now, the panelists, this morning it's just Dr. Miles-Tribble and I, we each get 10 minutes. Every panelist gets 10 minutes, okay? Now, the next panel has 4 people on it, so it's even more important, right, that they get 10 minutes. Am I emphasizing that enough? 10 minutes. I have here an iPhone that has a timer on it that will go off after 10 minutes. And I'm expecting then that panelists who are talking, whether they might even be mid-speech when it goes off, and I'm expecting that, boom, they're done talking at that point. Because the point of the panelists is not to be comprehensive, and I've said that to them over and over. But, part of the reason I'm saying what I'm saying is because I'm the vice president of academics and dean of the faculty, and I know how faculty can talk on and on and on. And what I have said to them is, this is not about you giving a comprehensive overview of this topic. It's about you stirring up ideas, stirring up enough thinking, enough ideas that these brilliant people in the room at these tables can have some really involved conversation on these topics. So I'm very excited for this. Dr. Evans and I have worked with a couple different groups to get ready for this, and every time we bring the topic up, it is really lively and it is very engaged. So very excited about what we're going to experience in the next 2 days. So thank you for being here. And now I'm going to introduce the panels. Myself, I'm Vice President of Academics, LeAnn Snow Flesher. Been here for many, many years, 30 years, in fact. August 1st, I celebrated 30 years here at this institution. And I have to my left Dr. Miles-Tribble, who's been here almost as long as I have, not quite, but she's been here a significant number of years herself. And I'm a professor of biblical interpretation. My major emphasis is Hebrew Bible. She is a professor of praxis, ministerial praxis, but she also has had quite a bit of background in womanist theology and ethics. So she brings a whole different perspective in view. We chatted just a few minutes about what we're going to do this morning, and it is clear that we're going to complement each other quite a bit. So I'm excited about that as well. Did I see a hand here? Yeah. Okay. I believe that was 10 minutes. Yes. You know what? Thank you for saying that, because I happen to have a copy of that right here, and I will flash that in a moment. What Dr. Leander is saying is this particular issue of the Review and Expositor has been put together by our faculty. Every article in here is by the BST core faculty, and it is titled, the whole issue is titled, Preaching Through Political Schism. So it's very timely, and it recently came out in print. We got these print versions on Friday. You can go online and get it also. You could go to arne.com and get it as well. With that, though, we need to begin so we can stay on schedule so that, our 10 minutes is a full 10 minutes. Anyway, here we go. I start with the roots of Christian nationalism. Is America a divinely ordained promised land for European Christians? Or is America a pluralistic democracy where all stand on equal footing as citizens? Most Americans embrace the latter vision, but a desperate, defensive, mostly white Christian minority continue to cling to the former. To fully understand the deep roots of today's white Christian nationalism, we need to go back to at least 1493. Now, on Monday of this week, Monday, October 14, 2024, was Columbus Day. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. He sailed by night, he sailed by day. He used the stars to find his way. And the poem goes on and on. But in 1493, Columbus returned to a hero's welcome in Spain, bringing with him gold, brightly colored parrots, and nearly a dozen captive indigenous people. The return of Columbus in 1493 also precipitated one of the most fateful but unacknowledged theological developments in the history of the Western Christian Church: the creation of what has come to be known as the doctrine of discovery. Established in a series of 15th century papal bulls, which are official edicts that carry the full weight of the church and papal authority, the doctrine of discovery claims that European civilization and Western Christianity are superior to all other cultures, races, and religions. The bull stated that any land not inhabited by Christians was available to be, quote unquote, discovered, claimed, and exploited by Christian rulers, and declared that, quote, the Catholic faith and the Christian religion be exalted and be everywhere increased and spread, that the health of souls be cared for, and that barbarous nations be overthrown and brought to the faith itself. This doctrine of discovery became the basis of all European claims in the Americas, as well as the foundation for the United States Western expansion termed manifest destiny. Manifest destiny was a phrase coined in 1845 by John O'Sullivan, and it is the idea that the United States is destined by God, so its advocates believed, to expand its dominion and spread democracy and capitalism across the entire North American continent. The philosophy drove 19th century U.S. territorial expansion and was used to justify the forced removal of Native Americans and other groups from their homes. In 1885, Josiah Strong, in a publication entitled Our Country, Its Possible Future, and Its Present Crisis, makes his case for America's divine calling by first recognizing that, quote, every race which has deeply impressed itself on the human family has been the representative of some great idea. According to Strong, the Anglo-Saxon is representative of two closely related great ideas: civil liberty and a pure spiritual Christianity. In her book, 2015 book, Stand Your Ground, Kelly Brown Douglas begins her review of history with a description of the Anglo-Saxon myth that describes ancient German civil society as having a respect for individual rights and an instinctive love of freedom. Douglas portrays the Puritans as an Anglo-Saxon remnant that sought to escape a corrupt church in England, arriving on the North American continent with two burning agendas. One, to create a utopian civil society based on Germania, and second, to establish what they understood to be a pure religion. The Puritans believed themselves to be the new Israel, the chosen people, entering the new Garden of Eden. From these beginnings came the theology of manifest destiny, which was derived from the papal doctrine of discovery. It was believed that the Anglo-Saxon was a people chosen by God for a special mission to the world. Ironically, Darwin's survival of the fittest was used to build the argument. And today, of course, we see it being used the opposite. But the argument that other races must assimilate or become extinct. The history of religion in the U.S. is anything but pure. Its roots flow from Anglo-Saxonism, which is based on the pure bloodlines of ancient Germania. It is from these roots that the theology of white supremacy has been formed. So, Christian nationalism today. In their 2020 book, Taking America Back for God, Christian Nationalism in the United States by Whitehead and Perry. Whitehead and Perry have provided a quantitative study on Christian nationalism in the U.S. As a result of their study, the authors have created the following definition for Christian nationalism: an ideology that idealizes and advocates a fusion of American civic life with a particular type of Christian identity and culture. From a set of quantitative data, Whitehead and Perry have created 4 categories of responders to Christian nationalism: rejectors, resistors, accommodators, and ambassadors. Surprisingly, the 2 categories, the accommodators and ambassadors that embrace Christian nationalism, cut across denominational, gender, age, and racial lines. Specifically, Whitehead and Perry have determined that Christian nationalists are a unique category of people that do not emphasize doctrinal orthodoxy or personal piety, but emphasize beliefs about historical identity, cultural preeminence, and political influence. Christian nationalists hold a cultural framework through which they perceive and navigate their social world using symbolic boundaries that conceptually blur and conflate religious identity. And when they say religious identity, they mean Christian, preferably Protestant. So conflating that with race, meaning white, nativity, meaning born in the United States, citizenship, meaning American, and political ideology, meaning social and fiscally conservative. To be clear, according to Whitehead and Perry, Christian nationalism is not equal to white evangelicalism, although there is considerable overlap. Rather, Christian nationalism is a framework that orients Americans' perspectives on national identity, belonging, and social hierarchies. In contrast, American evangelicalism is a theological tradition prioritizing certain doctrinal commitments, including biblical inerrancy and conversionism. Christian nationalism includes assumptions of nativism, meaning born in America, right? White supremacy, patriarchy, and heteronormativity, along with the divine sanction for authoritarian control and militarism. It is as ethnic and political as it is religious. Christian nationalism contends that America has been and should always be distinctly Christian in its self-identity, in its interpretations of its own history, in its sacred symbols, in its cherished values, and in its public policies. And it aims to keep it that way. Christian nationalists are not interested in creating a theocracy and are rarely concerned with instituting explicitly Christ-like policies or even policies reflecting New Testament ethics. Rather, they view God's expectations of America as akin to God's commands to Old Testament Israel, believing America should fear God's wrath for unfaithfulness while assuming God's blessing or even mandate for subduing the continent by force if necessary. The tenets of Christian nationalism laid out above typically result in 4 significant ideological perspectives. 1, they support Donald Trump for president. 2, they tend to be xenophobic. 3, they tend to be unwilling to acknowledge injustices. 4, they tend to be I can't even say it, I'm so upset by it, misogynist. Why Trump? Because Trump is the defender of the power and values they perceive are being threatened in the progressive liberal environment. Why xenophobic? Because if one is not native born, Christian and white, they will bring alternative priorities and moralities to the nation. Why unwilling to acknowledge injustices? Because of a need for authoritarian control. Why misogynist? Because everyone should be in their proper place. Whitehead and Perry's strongest defining statement about Christian nationalism follows. Christian nationalism is political idolatry dressed up as religious orthodoxy. That statement is on your set of questions. So if you didn't catch it all, it is there. And my 10 minutes are up. Dr. Miles-Tribble.
Let's give Dr. Flesher a hand. I'm not sure that I will take the full 10 minutes because I just have some bullet points that I want to speak from. In terms of fast-forwarding us from the roots that Dr. Flesher so capably summarized, fast-forwarding us to the 20th century. And the theme of my remarks is really to have us think about at our tables, how has religion, and you won't see it in that list because I didn't get it to you, I just got back in town, but how has religion infused our cultural milieu? How has religion infused our cultural milieu, and what are the ramifications? In other words, what and how do we understand the religio-politics of our society, of our culture, and even of our global dynamics going on? Now, one of the things that sometimes we don't think about is that when we pull out a dollar bill, or any bill, I believe, on the back of that bill, on the back of that money, says, "In God we trust." And some of us think that that started with the Constitution or with the Puritans coming over. Really, that started in the 1950s in terms of generating this patriotic symbolism in our society to counter the growing secular communist Russian push in our global arena. So the advent of prayer in the schools and the Pledge of Allegiance, also 20th century phenomenon. So it's very important to understand that there were political and socialized reasons behind some of the religious and zeal and patriotic rituals that some of us just came to expect as part of our society. Now, I want to give you a title. There's a very interesting YouTube. You can Google this title and find this CBS special on YouTube. It's called "The Rights Fight to Make America Christian." The Rights Fight to Make America Christian. And I just want to share with you a few points from that, because it's important. What is emphasized in there is that Christian nationalism, we have to think of it as a privileging of the Christian religion over and above any other religion. And of course, in elementary school, we came learning that the Puritans came and others came to stress religious freedom, that anyone, whatever your religious beliefs, that you could come and that America would be a place where you could practice your religion. And in fact, the privileging of religion in this Christian nationalism is really saying that anyone else that is not a practicing Christian is a threat to the safety of our nation. The other thing that really came, and there's the special opens with Reverend Ken Peters. Remember that name because there are a number of YouTube presentations of his sermons and his preaching, but he likes to say that his ancestors came to America, that America was founded on these Christian principles, that our founding fathers intended this country to be Christian, not Muslim, not Hindu, and he goes through this litany of things. And so this privileging and this connection of the privileging to the formation of our country. In other words, if you are not Christian, you are not patriotic. And so these connections of the religio-politics, therefore, in this special, you will hear from other voices that say then that this infusion of religion into the politics by conjoining it with patriotism has made it and is making it more and more risky, dangerous, precarious for others who are not of same to exist safely and equitably in this country. Now, the other thing that you will find Reverend Peters and others saying is that they abhor this term, Christian nationalism. They are not a nationalist. They are a Christian. And so this notion, and then the next sentence goes into why he's a patriot and why he has founded the Patriot Church. But yet, and again, the class that I teach and have these videos in is a class on rhetoric and how rhetoric has infused our socialization and really being critical about these phrases that you hear, these values that are spewed out, like family values and being an American and being a patriot, because behind those terms are loaded understandings and meanings. And so it's very important that we parse this out. Now, there's another pastor, and by the way, Reverend Peters is in Knoxville, Tennessee. So that sense of patriotic Christianity is tied very much to the conservative right and Christianity and the Bible Belt. And this kind of teaching, and I want you to watch that video and ask yourself, what do I see in the visual? Trump signs in the church, Trump signs in the public, him talking about different aspects in his sermons and a number of other pastors' sermons. So we need to, and Dr. Flesher has put on the 10 minutes for me, so I need to move on. But we need to be very mindful of what it is that is being professed. The other thing that I want to recommend that you also, Dr. Flesher mentioned Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas, Womanist Scholar, Womanist Ethics book, Standing Your Ground. But you also need to look for Dr. Aubrey Hendricks' book on Christian nationalism. Both of these books are approaching the topic from a Black liberation, womanist liberation perspective, and critiquing, because we cannot disconnect this notion of Christian nationalism from the other intersections of race, gender, class, And so we need to read some of these things to understand how they interface. As well, in my book, Change Agent Church and Black Lives Matter Times, I also analyze the phenomenon of Christian nationalism and how it came about. And what we are seeing in this, what I call lemming syndrome or lemming behavior, is because this Christian ethic has been so infused into our churches and our ritualizations and our values that the people in the pews make the connection between being a person of faith, make the connection of being a person of faith with being a good Christian, which means being a conservative, which means being a patriot, which means that anyone else that thinks differently and enables them to then point the finger and say, but you're a liberal, you're not a Christian, you're not a patriot, therefore you must be one of those socialists or one of those anarchists, because it's been infused in their Bible study and in what they hear on Sunday. And so I'm going to, I hear that, but I just want to say that, because you didn't have the timer on for yourself, but I'm not going to go much longer. I just want to say that, to raise a point that Dr. Flesher raised about this advent of eugenics and how we need to be mindful of that being this Darwinism recycled and repackaged in a way of not only raising Christians as privileged, but also raising the superiority of a certain race and class of people. Therefore, we can't just parse out the number of intersectional dynamics. We have to understand that they are fitting in a very complex intricacy that we must critique. Thank you.
All right, thank you.